My mom tried to sell my baby to keep my sister's wedding perfect, so I turned her dream ceremony into a public trial in front of 200 guests. I used to believe blood was thicker than water, until I discovered my own mother had already signed the papers to give away my unborn child. My name is Emily Carter, I'm 26 years old and I work as a nurse at the maternity ward of St. Mary's Hospital. 7 months pregnant and glowing with excitement about becoming a mother, I never imagined that the woman who gave birth to me was secretly plotting to steal my baby before they even took their first breath. Living in our childhood home felt like stepping back into familiar rhythms that I thought would comfort me during this vulnerable time. My mother Margaret, 54, and enjoying her retirement after 30 years of molding young minds as an elementary school teacher, seemed thrilled about becoming a grandmother. My younger sister Sophie, 28 and riding high on her success as one of the city's most sought-after wedding planners, was deep in preparations for what she kept calling the wedding of the century. Her own elaborate celebration that had consumed our household's attention for the better part of a year. I genuinely believed I had struck gold in the family support department. Here I was, a single woman navigating pregnancy alone, but surrounded by 2 capable women who I assumed would help me through the challenges ahead. Mom had raised 2 daughters successfully, so surely she'd have wisdom to share about motherhood. Sophie, with her organizational skills and eye for detail, could probably help me prepare for the baby's arrival with the same precision she brought to her clients' special days. What I didn't fully acknowledge, even to myself, was how deeply ingrained our family dynamics had become over the years. Mom had always treated Sophie like a precious porcelain doll, fragile, beautiful, and deserving of the best life had to offer. Every achievement of Sophie's was celebrated with elaborate praise and often expensive rewards. Her graduation from college earned her a trip to Europe. Her first big wedding planning contract was marked with a surprise party that Mom organized for weeks. Meanwhile, I had somehow fallen into the role of the steady, reliable daughter who didn't need much attention or celebration. When I graduated nursing school with honors, Mom took us out to dinner at a chain restaurant. When I got promoted to head nurse in the maternity ward, she gave me a card and a pat on the shoulder. I told myself it didn't matter because I was naturally more independent, more self-sufficient. I was the daughter who could handle things on her own, who didn't need constant validation or support. But pregnancy changes everything about how you see relationships and support systems. Suddenly, I found myself craving the kind of attention and care that had always been reserved for Sophie. I wanted Mom to fuss over me, to ask detailed questions about my doctor's appointments, to get excited about nursery preparations. Instead, most conversations somehow circled back to Sophie's wedding planning drama or her latest client's impossible demands. The irony wasn't lost on me that I spent my days caring for new mothers and their babies, offering them the kind of emotional support and professional guidance I wished I was receiving at home. At work, I was valued for my expertise and compassion. At home, I felt like background noise in the symphony of Sophie's wedding preparations. But I kept telling myself that this was just temporary, that once the wedding was over, things would shift back to normal. Whatever normal meant in our family. The first sign something was wrong came during my 6th month of pregnancy. Mom started receiving mysterious phone calls that she would take in her bedroom with the door closed. Whenever I walked into a room, she would quickly end conversations or change the subject entirely. She began going out for hours without explanation, claiming she was running errands or meeting old teacher friends. When I offered to come along, she always had an excuse for why I should stay home and rest. What really made my stomach churn was catching glimpses of hushed conversations between Mom and Sophie about making arrangements and ensuring everything would be perfect for the wedding. They would stop talking whenever I entered the room, exchanging meaningful glances that made me feel like an outsider in my own home. Sophie, who had always been self-centered, seemed unusually interested in my pregnancy appointments, and kept asking detailed questions about my due date and hospital plans. The gnawing anxiety was slowly consuming me from the inside out, creating a constant state of unease that I desperately wanted to dismiss as nothing more than pregnancy-induced overthinking. Every fiber of my rational mind kept insisting that I was simply experiencing the emotional roller coaster that comes with carrying a child. After all, weren't expectant mothers notorious for becoming overly sensitive, reading sinister meanings into innocent conversations, and developing irrational fears about people they trusted most? The pregnancy books I'd been devouring all mentioned mood swings, heightened intuition, and protective instincts that could border on paranoia. I threw myself into typical nesting behaviors with almost obsessive determination, hoping that focusing on concrete preparations would quiet the alarm bells ringing in my head. Hours were spent researching the safest cribs, comparing baby monitors with military-grade precision, and organizing tiny clothes by size and season. I read every parenting manual I could find, from gentle attachment theory to practical guides about sleep training, telling myself that knowledge would somehow shield my baby from whatever vague threat I couldn't quite identify. The nursery became my sanctuary and my project. I painted the walls a soothing sage green, assembled furniture with meticulous care, and arranged stuffed animals with the kind of attention to detail that would have made Sophie proud. Each completed task should have brought me satisfaction and excitement, but instead, I found myself constantly glancing over my shoulder, wondering who might be watching, who might be planning something I couldn't see. My colleagues at the hospital noticed my distracted state during shifts. Dr. Peterson, my own obstetrician, gently suggested that perhaps I was experiencing some prenatal anxiety and offered to refer me to a counselor. Part of me wanted to accept that explanation, to believe that hormones and stress were creating monsters in the shadows where none existed. It would have been so much easier to take medication for anxiety than to acknowledge that my instincts might be warning me of real danger lurking within my own family. But deep in my bones, in that primal place where maternal instincts live, I knew something was fundamentally wrong. The feeling wasn't the nebulous worry of an anxious mind, it was sharp, specific, and growing stronger each day. Something terrible was being planned, and my baby was at the center of it. Everything changed on a Tuesday afternoon when I came home early from work with a migraine. I was grabbing some water from the kitchen when I heard Mom on the phone in the living room. She thought I was upstairs resting, so she wasn't being careful about her volume. The words I heard made my blood run cold. "Yes, I understand the timeline is tight, but the baby is due in 2 months. We need to have everything finalized before then. No, she doesn't know anything about this. I'm handling it. The wedding is in 6 weeks, and we cannot have a crying infant disrupting Sophie's perfect day." My hands started shaking as I pressed myself against the kitchen wall, straining to hear more. Mom continued, "I have her medical records and appointment schedule. She goes to Dr. Peterson every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Yes, I can provide all the necessary documentation." The room started spinning. I felt like I might vomit, and not from morning sickness. What documentation was she talking about? What timeline? I crept upstairs on trembling legs and locked myself in the bathroom, trying to process what I had just heard. Was my mother seriously discussing my pregnancy with strangers? And what did Sophie's wedding have to do with my baby? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through every strange interaction from the past few weeks. Mom's secretive behavior, Sophie's unusual interest in my pregnancy, their whispered conversations. It was all connected somehow. But connected to what? The next morning, while Mom was at her weekly book club, I decided to investigate. I felt terrible about snooping, but my maternal instincts were screaming that something was very wrong. I started with Mom's home office, where she kept all her important papers and correspondence. What I found in her email inbox made me want to scream. There were dozens of messages from an organization called Bright Future Adoptions, dating back 3 months. 3 months! The subject lines made my stomach drop. Application status update, medical history requirements, timeline for placement, and most horrifying of all, birth mother consent forms. Birth mother consent forms. I was listed as the birth mother, but I had never contacted any adoption agency. I had never even considered giving up my baby. I clicked on the most recent email with shaking fingers, and what I read made me feel like the ground was disappearing beneath my feet. The email detailed a timeline for my baby's placement with a loving family who had already paid a substantial fee. It mentioned that all necessary documentation had been provided by the birth mother's legal guardian, and that final signatures would be obtained at the hospital immediately following delivery. The email was signed by a caseworker named Janet Mills, who thanked my mother for handling this difficult situation with such care and discretion. Legal guardian? I was 26 years old. Mom wasn't my legal guardian, and she certainly wasn't authorized to make decisions about my baby. But as I scrolled through more emails, I realized the horrifying scope of her deception. She had been impersonating me, providing my personal information, my medical records, Even my work schedule. She had told the adoption agency that I was mentally incompetent due to pregnancy-related depression, and that she had power of attorney to make decisions on my behalf. The lies were elaborate and detailed. According to the emails, I was an unwed mother struggling with addiction and mental health issues, who had begged my mother to arrange an adoption because I couldn't care for a child. None of it was true, but the adoption agency believed every word because my mother had provided forged documents to support her claims. I found the forged papers in a manila folder buried under other documents. My signature had been practiced and replicated on multiple forms: consent for adoption, medical release forms, even a letter supposedly written by me expressing my desire to give up parental rights. The handwriting was good, but it wasn't mine. My mother had been forging my signature for months. The most damning piece of evidence was a contract with the adoptive family. They had already paid $50,000 to the agency, with an additional $25,000 promised upon successful placement. My mother was selling my baby, and she was making money from it. I sat in that office chair for what felt like hours, staring at the evidence of my mother's betrayal. The woman who had raised me, who had taught me right from wrong, who had always preached about the importance of family, was planning to steal my child for money and to avoid inconveniencing Sophie's wedding. When I finally gathered the strength to move, I carefully photographed every document and email. I forwarded the most incriminating messages to my personal email account and made copies of the forged signatures. If I was going to confront Mom about this, I needed proof that she couldn't deny or destroy. That evening, I waited until Sophie got home from work. I wanted both of them present for this conversation. I found them in the kitchen, chatting about wedding flower arrangements like nothing in the world was wrong. The casual normalcy of the scene made my anger burn even hotter. "We need to talk," I said, placing the printed emails on the kitchen counter. "All of us." Mom glanced at the papers and her face went pale. Sophie looked confused until she saw the bright future adoptions letterhead, and then her expression shifted to something that looked like guilt. "Emily, I can explain," Mom started, but I cut her off. "Explain what? How you've been forging my signature for months, how you've been selling my baby behind my back, or how you've convinced an adoption agency that I'm mentally incompetent so you can steal my child." Sophie's eyes widened. "Mom, you said she agreed to this. You said she wanted to give the baby up but was too embarrassed to handle it herself." "I never agreed to anything," I shouted, my voice cracking with emotion. "I never even knew about any of this until today. Mom has been lying to everyone, including you." Mom straightened her shoulders, and for a moment I saw a flash of the authoritative teacher she used to be. "Emily, you need to calm down and think rationally. You're not ready to be a mother. You don't have a stable relationship. You're barely making ends meet on a nurse's salary, and this baby would ruin everything you've worked for." "That's not your decision to make," I screamed. "This is my baby, my choice, my life." "Your choice?" Mom laughed bitterly. "When have you ever made a good choice? You got pregnant by some man you barely knew. You can't even afford your own apartment. And now you want to bring a child into this chaos? I'm trying to save you from destroying your future. By selling my baby? You're making money from this, Mom. I saw the contracts." Sophie gasped. "Money, Mom? You said this was about helping Emily and giving a childless couple a chance at happiness. You didn't say anything about money." Mom's facade was cracking. "The money is compensation for expenses, nothing more." "And yes, Sophie, this is about your happiness too. Do you really want a screaming infant at your wedding? Do you want all the attention shifted away from your special day because Emily brought a crying baby?" The casual cruelty in her voice was breathtaking. She wasn't even trying to hide her priorities anymore. Sophie's wedding was more important than my baby's life, more important than my rights as a mother, more important than our family bonds. "You're sick," I whispered. "You're actually sick in the head if you think this is okay." "I'm practical," Mom snapped. "I'm thinking about what's best for everyone involved. The adoptive family desperately wants a child. You're not ready to be a mother, and Sophie deserves her perfect wedding day. Everyone wins. Everyone except me and my baby. A baby you can't afford and don't have the maturity to raise." The argument escalated into a screaming match that brought our neighbors to their windows. Sophie tried to play peacemaker, but I could see in her eyes that part of her agreed with Mom. She wanted her perfect wedding day more than she wanted me to keep my child. That night, I called in sick to work and spent hours researching my legal options. What my mother had done was criminal. forgery, fraud, potentially kidnapping charges if she had succeeded in taking my baby. I contacted a lawyer who specialized in family law, and she confirmed my worst fears and best hopes. Yes, my mother had committed serious crimes. Yes, I could press charges. And yes, I could stop the adoption from proceeding. But she also warned me that fighting this would destroy my family relationships permanently. Are you prepared for that? She asked. Because once you file these charges, there's no going back. I looked down at my belly, feeling my baby kick as if they were urging me to fight. My family tried to sell my child, I told her. There's already no going back. The lawyer helped me file a restraining order against the adoption agency and my mother, preventing any further action regarding my baby. We also filed criminal charges for forgery, fraud, and attempted kidnapping. The local police were surprisingly supportive when they saw the evidence. Apparently, illegal adoption schemes were more common than I had realized. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Sophie's wedding was still 3 weeks away, and I had a plan that would ensure she got exactly the kind of attention she deserved. I continued living in the house, pretending to be defeated and resigned to the situation. Mom thought she had won when I stopped fighting with her. She even had the audacity to comfort me, saying things like, "You'll understand someday that this was for the best." I used those 3 weeks to gather more evidence. I secretly recorded conversations where Mom discussed the adoption plans. I documented every lie she told, every forged signature she created, every illegal action she took. I also reached out to some of her former teaching colleagues and discovered this wasn't the first time Mom had engaged in questionable behavior involving children. The wedding day arrived with all the pomp and circumstance Sophie had dreamed of. The venue was decorated with thousands of white roses. The guest list included 200 of our family's closest friends and relatives, and Sophie looked absolutely radiant in her custom designer gown. Mom had spared no expense to make this day perfect for her favorite daughter. I waited until the reception, after the dinner had been served and the toasts were about to begin. Sophie was glowing with happiness, surrounded by friends and family who kept telling her how beautiful she looked and how perfect everything was. Mom was basking in the compliments about what a wonderful job she had done organizing such an elegant event. That's when I stood up and asked the DJ for the microphone. "I'd like to make a toast," I announced, my voice carrying clearly through the sound system. The room fell quiet as everyone turned to look at me. Sophie smiled, probably expecting some sweet sisterly tribute. "I want to toast my family," I began, looking directly at Mom and Sophie. "Specifically, I want to thank my mother for teaching me what family loyalty really means." Mom started to look nervous. She probably sensed where this was going. "You see, family loyalty means protecting each other, supporting each other through difficult times, and always putting each other's well-being first. My mother has shown me the perfect example of family loyalty by trying to sell my unborn baby to strangers so that nothing would interfere with Sophie's perfect wedding day." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Sophie's face went white. Mom stood up, reaching for the microphone, but I stepped away from her. "For the past 4 months, my mother has been forging my signature on adoption papers, telling an agency that I'm mentally incompetent, and arranging to have my baby taken from me immediately after birth. All because she didn't want a crying infant to disrupt this beautiful celebration." The guests were staring in horrified fascination. I could see some of them taking out their phones to record what was happening. Sophie's new husband looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "But don't worry," I continued, smiling sweetly at my family. "I've learned so much about loyalty from this experience. I've learned to be loyal to people who actually deserve it. That's why I've filed criminal charges against my mother for forgery, fraud, and attempted kidnapping. The police have all the evidence they need, including recorded conversations where she discusses selling my baby for $75,000. Mom lunged for me, screaming that I was lying, that I was ruining everything, that I was selfish and ungrateful. Security guards hired for the wedding had to restrain her as she continued shrieking at me and the horrified guests. Sophie was crying, her perfect makeup running down her cheeks as she begged me to stop, to not ruin her special day. "Please, Emily, we can talk about this later. This is my wedding. And this is my baby's life," I replied calmly. "But don't worry, Sophie. I'm sure this will be a wedding everyone remembers forever." I set the microphone down and walked out of the reception hall, leaving behind the chaos of shouting relatives, crying bridesmaids, and a bride whose perfect day had just become a nightmare. I could hear Mom still screaming my name as I drove away, but I felt lighter than I had in months. The fallout was swift and brutal. The wedding reception ended early as guests left in shocked whispers, discussing the scandal they had just witnessed. Several relatives called me that night, some to condemn me for ruining Sophie's wedding, others to say they had suspected something was wrong and were proud of me for standing up for myself. Mom's arrest made the local news. Retired teacher charged with attempting to illegally adopt grandchild was the headline that ran for 3 days. Her mugshot appeared on social media, shared by people who knew our family. The adoption agency was investigated and ultimately shut down for their role in facilitating illegal adoptions. Sophie's marriage lasted exactly 6 weeks. Her new husband filed for annulment, claiming he couldn't be associated with a family involved in such a scandal. Her wedding planning business collapsed as clients canceled their contracts, not wanting to work with someone from that crazy family on the news. The criminal case against Mom took several months to resolve. She initially tried to claim she was protecting me from my own poor judgment, but the evidence was overwhelming. The forged signatures, the recorded conversations, the financial transactions, it all painted a clear picture of premeditated fraud and attempted kidnapping. She eventually pled guilty to multiple charges and received a sentence of 2 years in prison, suspended on the condition that she pay full restitution to the adoptive family, who sued for the return of their money plus damages, and have no contact with me or my child for 5 years. During the legal proceedings, more details emerged about Mom's motivations. It wasn't just about Sophie's wedding or the money, though both played a role. Mom had always seen me as the less successful daughter, the one who needed to be managed and controlled. My pregnancy represented a loss of control over my life that she couldn't tolerate. In her twisted logic, arranging the adoption was her way of saving me from the consequences of my own choices. Sophie never apologized. Even after learning the full extent of Mom's deception, she continued to blame me for destroying her wedding and her marriage. She moved to another state and cut off all contact with me. In her final text message, she wrote, "I hope you're happy. You destroyed our entire family for one baby." But she was wrong. I didn't destroy our family. I exposed the fact that it was already broken. A real family doesn't try to steal each other's children. A real family doesn't prioritize party planning over human rights. A real family doesn't abandon you when you refuse to be victimized. I gave birth to my daughter Lily on a crisp October morning, surrounded by friends who had become my chosen family. My coworkers from the hospital were there, along with neighbors who had supported me through the legal battle and new friends I had met in single mother support groups. The delivery room was filled with love and excitement, everything a birth should be. Holding Lily for the first time, I felt overwhelming gratitude that she was safe, that she was mine, that no one would ever be able to take her from me. She was perfect, tiny fingers, bright eyes, and a cry that was music to my ears. The cry that my mother thought would ruin Sophie's wedding was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I moved to a different city 6 months after Lily was born, wanting a fresh start away from the lingering scandal and judgment. I found a job at a children's hospital where my colleagues knew nothing about my family drama. They simply saw me as Emily, a dedicated nurse and loving mother. Lily is now 2 years old, walking and talking and bringing joy to everyone she meets. She's curious about everything, fearless in her exploration of the world, and absolutely beautiful. Sometimes I look at her and can't believe that my own mother tried to sell this precious child to strangers. I've built a new life surrounded by people who genuinely care about us. Lily's babysitter treats her like a beloved niece. My coworkers celebrate her milestones like proud aunts and uncles, and our neighbors look out for us like extended family. We've created the kind of family I always thought I had, one based on love, respect, and genuine care for each other's well-being. The legal victory was satisfying, but the personal victory has been even sweeter. I learned that I'm stronger than I ever knew, that I can protect my child from anyone who tries to harm her, and that family isn't defined by blood relations, but by the people who show up for you when life gets difficult. Mom sends birthday cards for Lily every year, which I throw away unopened. Sophie occasionally tries to connect through social media, usually when she needs something, or wants to play the victim about how the family scandal affected her life. I block every attempt at contact. I don't miss them. I don't miss the constant criticism, the favoritism, the manipulation, or the drama. I don't miss walking on eggshells around people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. Most importantly, I don't miss the anxiety of wondering what they might do next to interfere with my life. What I've gained is infinitely more valuable than what I lost. I have peace, autonomy, and the knowledge that I will always put my daughter's needs above anyone else's convenience. I have friends who celebrate our successes and support us through challenges. I have a career that I love, and a home where we feel safe and valued. Sometimes people ask if I regret exposing my family so publicly, if I wish I had handled the situation more privately. The answer is always no. What my mother did was criminal, and criminals should face consequences regardless of their relationship to their victims. What Sophie did was cruel, and cruelty should be called out regardless of whether it's delivered by a sister or a stranger. But more importantly, I regret nothing because speaking up saved my daughter's life. If I had stayed silent, if I had let shame or family loyalty stop me from fighting back, Lily would have been raised by strangers while I spent the rest of my life grieving for the child who was stolen from me. Instead, she's sleeping peacefully in her crib down the hall, surrounded by toys and books and all the love I have to give her. Tomorrow we'll wake up together, have breakfast together, and face whatever the day brings together. She'll never have to wonder if her mother values her less than someone else's convenience, because she'll always know that she comes first in my life. I used to believe that blood was thicker than water, but I've learned that the full saying is the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. The relationships we choose, the people who stand by us through trials, the bonds we forge through mutual respect and love, these are stronger than any biological connection. My daughter and I are proof that sometimes the family you need isn't the one you're born into, but the one you create through courage, love, and an unwavering commitment to protecting what matters most. And nothing, absolutely nothing, matters more than keeping my child safe and loved, even if it means cutting ties with the people who brought me into this world. That's a lesson I hope I never have to teach her, but one I'll never forget myself.